Welcome, everybody. I am Nathan Hansen. I am the Public Relations Coordinator for Golden Shovel Agency, here to welcome you to hear Ron Kresha's presentation on leveraging your local airport. This is obviously a very timely subject. As to drive that home, I just saw that Uber just offered a sneak preview of air taxis in Dubai. So this technology is coming, these changes are coming, and Ron is here to talk about how you can prepare your local airport to take advantage of these changes. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Nathan. Isn't that amazing? I wrote this paper and he had a chance to preview it. And I know some of the people that were reviewing it thought I was a little bit far-fetched and out there, but there you go. These examples are all over us, all around. So thank you, everyone. I'm excited to talk to you a little bit today about strategies to leverage your airport. This is a community guide to airport promotion, planning, and economic development. At Golden Shovel, we have launched ImpactAir, which is about bringing the awareness and promotion and marketing for airports as one of your important resources and assets. So we'll just jump through a couple of items here, and then I'll pause from time to time to see if there's a question that comes through the chat. And Nathan, if you just want to flag me on that, so we can make sure we don't miss anything.
I will.
Very good. So talk just briefly about our pride of Golden Shovel, what we do best, and we really are helpful to communities, and we really love our projects. So we have a very robust success rate, and it's something that we continue to want to talk about because, frankly, our clients are just fantastic. We talk about some of our award-winning campaigns and client success. So we have the experience coming into these, and what I'm excited about is taking all of our success, everything we've learned, our experience, and then porting that over into the aviation and promotion space because we see a huge need to help communities out there. So what are we going to cover today? Well, we're going to talk about the aviation disruption. Why now is the moment to act? I'm going to talk a little bit about economic impact, why a $150 billion industry needs us to pay attention to it. We're going to talk about the future of GA, General Aviation, and I'll try to cover some of those acronyms that go with that. Then we'll talk a little bit about master planning and funding, success stories, and then how you build a marketing strategy and how you can get started right away with promoting your airport. At the end of this, I'll give you a link to the white paper that we've created, because one of the things we do at Golden Shovel is we want to share what we've learned. So we're not about cloistering anything or holding it close. We want to partner, we want to work with folks, but at the end of the day, we want to spread the right information and help communities be successful. So let's talk about why I'm doing this. Why would Ron Kresha want to get into aviation and talk about this? Why is that important? Well, one of the things that has been very evident is the awareness gap. People are unaware of the airport as an asset. It's talked about as this luxury. It's talked about this thing out of town, or it's just talked about as everything but an asset. And when communities aren't talking about assets and they're not closing that awareness gap, those resources go unutilized. With all of our work in economic development space, what we are finding is communities are doing their darndest to compete on every level, and we want to make sure that the airport and the aviation industry is part of that plan. The awareness gap tends to hit the most vulnerable the most. What we find out is communities that have the largest disconnect between knowing what assets are available and promoting those, and those that are able to make those connections, it really becomes a disadvantage. And we know that information travels through existing networks, which connects the connected and isolates the disconnected. So we're trying to break up some of those circles. We're trying to create that Venn diagram with lots of intersection points and really promote aviation in the communities as that strong asset. Because we know an unaware community is a disempowered community with less and less advocates. The lesson that I try to bring to the space is I never want communities to get left behind and feel like they were never told. I never want to hear that, hey, why didn't you tell me? Communities do have control over asset promotion and resource advocacy. Yes, it's hard, but hard is not impossible. So let's start off with a positive example. Crawford County Airport in Robinson, Illinois. An F3 tornado in March 31st of 2023 literally leveled and destroyed the airport. Could have been incredibly detrimental. But they had already had a strong advocacy. They were already talking to their communities, and they had a proactive plan for runway improvements, instrument approaches, electrical vehicle charging. And when this happened, they were already ahead of the game with how they were going to do new changes in structure. And unfortunately, the tornado created a ton of devastation, but from there was the opportunity, and they could leverage it with some federal and state dollars. And in November of 25, just last November 25, they opened their $3.8 million terminal. But what happened really is the forward planning turned disaster into accelerated opportunity. And so the message here is be proactive, get to that planning, avert the future mistakes. You can't control the events, but we know that innovation can be predicted. And what you're going to see today, I hope, is that disruption is coming. While the tornado was unexpected and it came, the disruption that you're going to hear about today is coming. It is on the horizon, and we know these changes are coming. So planning today prevents tomorrow's crisis. So let's talk a little bit about aviation disruption. Never before has a confluence of autonomy, AI, cheaper fuel, next generation GPS, and increased human mobility presented such a radical opportunity and growth. And I see it across all the spaces that transportation is going to go through an unprecedented disruption that we haven't seen before. I mean, if you think back to the 1920s with the early advent of flight, we're going to see incredible change in the next 15 years that will eclipse what we've seen all the way back to the 1920s. Autonomous flight, we already have the U.S. Air Force looking at and securing contracts for autonomous aircraft. Cirrus and other planes are using the auto land coming through Garmin, where you can land without pilot interaction. I'm by no means saying that we need to get rid of the pilots in the cockpit. What I'm saying is the autonomous nature is coming to create a space where aircraft will be more accessible to people without some of the constraints of workforces and human interaction. We have the vertical takeoff and landing revolution. Archer is already out there, and they're playing with and experimenting autonomous vertical and takeoff landing aircraft. And these are aircraft that will basically be able to pick up, drop off things with very little interaction. And we're already seeing flying car legislation in Pennsylvania, Minnesota, New Hampshire, and Florida. So people are preparing for this. In fact, the FAA already has come out with guidelines on how to prepare your airport for this. So one of the first things I would recommend to anybody in the industry is go look at those FAA briefs and talk about to your local, what do we need to do now to make sure that when these vertical and autonomous vehicles come in, that we're able to accommodate those. We have the next generation of NAS, which is the National Airspace System. So the FAA is modernizing this system with new satellite and GPS technology that'll give us more advanced digital comms and surveillance. Basically, these autonomous aircraft will have better visibility into each other, and they'll be able to operate. Then we talk about AAM, which is Advanced Air Mobility. The FAA has already issued briefings on this for getting airports ready with the vertical port design and standards. All of this disruption is coming in the next 10 to 15 years. A lot of it's already here. It just needs to move through standards, regulation, make sure the safety is there, and then get approvals. I see a time when, very much like the mobile app transportation we have, an individual will be able to order transportation from their phone. An autonomous vehicle will pick them up, such as a rideshare, take them to a location close to the airport, if not the airport. They'll then get on a vertical and take off. Autonomous takes them to the next transportation hub, and then off they go into the air system. All of that will happen without an individual ever having to own an aircraft, a car, or any of the infrastructure that we have today. They just participate in it. So it's exciting times. I know there's some uncertainty and some fears that go with those, but generally it's pretty exciting because you're starting to see communities that have had low access to transportation actually being able to now interface with the entire national airspace system and be part of the transportation. So why should we do this? Well, I can't preach this enough. The economic impact of general aviation is substantial. The numbers tell a compelling story. And as I try to remind communities, if you're listening, this story is for you. With 150 billion annually generated by general aviation, and that is the pilots that are just a commercial and below. We're not talking the regionals, or we're not talking the Deltas, the Uniteds, the Americans, all that. We're talking the general aviation, the people in your community that are flying the airports locally. 8 million in jobs supported nationally. 5% of the national GDP comes from civilian aviation, and 90% of the 220,000 aircraft are registered to general aviation. There's a lot of transportation in aviation. It's growing. Up to 19% of state GDP, aviation isn't just national. When you start to look at what your state's contribution or what states benefit from the contribution of aviation, it's quite substantial. It's your community's economic backbone, and airports quietly hold together threads of safety, ambition, and economic resilience that are hard to measure until they're suddenly missing. And that's the one point that I'll try to get across today is it's like oxygen. You really don't know it's a problem until it's gone. Small airports make a significant contribution to local economies. Your airport is simply more than a runway. When you start to look at all the services, and when I talk about the awareness gap, a lot of community members don't understand all the areas that are interfaced in the airport. You have medical, you have air ambulance, medevac, and flying essentially ICUs. The airplanes that can come into some areas, and as long as you've got a hard surface 3,000 foot runway with some type of instrument approach, whether it's GPS or ILS, you can get these aircraft into your community, and that can be amazing life-saving technology. We see a lot of ag aviation, whether it's drones, whether it's crop spraying, aerial photography, and this goes far beyond what we have all thought or seen with just an aircraft that may do crop spraying. We see drones that are out there that are taking samples. They're using satellite imagery, they're using imagery over it to find out how to get precision agriculture to move up, whether it's going to be crop spraying or fertilizing and all that. So it's actually way better for the climate, because they're not, it's expensive to put these fertilizations and these weed suppressants on the whole crop when they can just do it very precisely. Corporate travel, you look at Cleveland Regional as an example, with Coca-Cola, Whirlpool, Amazon. These are all coming through these hubs. We move a lot of cargo, and part of that cargo is just people. Now we move a lot of other things. Flight training and flight schools. With an airport 2,000 feet in the Lee Airport in Maryland, they've got 41 jobs and hundreds of pilots trained. It's amazing. The community that I'm in, a town of 8,000, I think they did 220 check rides last year. And that's all of these students that are coming in. They're staying in housing. They're going to restaurants. They're participating in, the shopping, the retail, and all that. And so it's a boon for the communities. Emergency services. Unfortunately, we have search and rescue, we have law enforcement and firefighting, but having access for that is an economic strength. And so making sure that that is part of what your community understands stems from your local airport. Of course, cargo and logistics. We're going to see more and more products delivered through air access. We're a community that likes to order things over the internet and have those products delivered quickly and very precisely. And that cargo and logistics is going to grow with vertical takeoff and landings. So aviation creates opportunities at every level of the community. And going back to the awareness gap, what we're really promoting is we have to get the communities to understand, hey, this is an economic anchor. This isn't just a luxury, your airport. So what do we see on the horizon? The fun part of predicting the future is I'll never be right. But it's looking out there, and we've looked at, hey, what are the patents that are out there now? What is going through the FAA? What is asked to be approval? What are state legislators approving to allow companies to come in? And here are some of the trends that we're seeing. 214,000 active aircraft now. That number could be as high as 220. The business jet demand is surging. The net jets, the club jets. People are moving out of first class and they're moving into the business jet and turboprops. Student pilots are on the rise. That's what today is. Looking just as recently as in the next year, we're going to see the electronic vertical takeoff and landing commercial ops expanding. We're going to see advanced air mobility vertiport infrastructure. Once the FAA puts out the guidelines as they have, they usually follow it up with funding that can be matched. Autonomous cargo operations. 2030, we can see that 25,000 active aircraft forecasts continuing to climb. When you start to look at the Diamonds and the Cirrus and some of these other Cessnas, Pipers, they're all selling more aircraft they have in previous times. So the general aviation boost is up. 20% increase in flight hours versus 2023. And we'll see ATP, which is one of the advanced ratings for certifications for pilots as they go into becoming transport pilots and they move up into the Uniteds, the Deltas, the FedEx, and so forth. By 2035, it could be very real that advanced air mobility is fully integrated. Autonomous aircraft, flying cars, multimodal aviation hubs, all of that. I hate to use the analogy, right? But some of the best imagery is kind of looking like the Jetsons. That is coming. That disruption is on the horizon. The technologies are being advanced. They just have to figure out how do they get the battery weights down? How do they transform maybe into a hydrogen fuel? Once they start to solve some of those programs, these things become more accessible, and then the cost comes down and the accessibility goes up. So our message is, as I'm out there talking to communities, if you prepare now, it'll transform your airport into an engine of innovation, economic resilience, and connectivity. So let's talk a little bit about advanced air mobility. Is your community ready? So there's an FAA engineering brief that came out in 2024. This sets the design standards and it puts together how airports can be prepared for what is going to come. Talks about your takeoff and lift area. And when you think of this, an vertical takeoff and landing is a drone or a helicopter that does vertical flight. So we're preparing for vertical aircraft, but there are some safety areas. There's some charging station. They have to do the fire safety if it's battery or hydrogen system. So it's getting your airport prepared for that because the FAA has the standards. They're talking about it, and they will also have the matching dollars out there. Municipalities that align early with these guidance are expected to benefit the most. Get ahead of the curve. Attracting private investment, stimulating job creation, and establishing new air-to-ground links will all be very, very important for getting ahead of this curve. So we recommend update your airport layout plan, reserve space for vertiports in your urban planning, engage with state aviation agencies, and begin community conversations about AAM, because one of the things that airports have to deal with is noise abatement and these other ones. And you start to get these types of airport operations coming in, you get these types of aircraft, you're going to have community members who are going to raise questions, they're going to share concerns, which are all part of the process. So get ahead of that with your preparation and your knowledge. Flying cars are going to be a reality. We're preparing for those. The question is whether your community is prepared and what that's going to look like. So if you haven't read or if you haven't visited your airport master planning, now is a great time to go back and review that, see what it is, see what needs to be updated. There's several steps to that. It's all very well documented and laid out on the process and how you get approval. But There's a pre-planning that needs determination. There's lots of public involvement. This is an opportunity to shrink that awareness gap. This is an opportunity. Don't just plan with a small group of airport leaders and community members, city council. Really invite the public and get them to start talking about what's coming. You have environmental considerations. You're going to have to look at, as you go through the impacts of expansion, what those environmental considerations would be. So look at your existing conditions, do an assessment, find out what the aviation forecast will be, start to project out some growth. Look at a facility requirements analysis. Are there alternatives to development? Is there leasing? Is there private? Look at your airport layout plan, and then put a facilities implementation plan together. And finally, when you have all that in place, you're going to start to look at a financial feasibility analysis. What's it going to take? And I know when a lot of people get to the financial feasibility stage, they're like, well, this is a lot. It's a number. And it's a number that can be managed with many different resources, and we can talk about that. The FAA Advisory Circular 150-570 is your guide, and you can look that up. You can download this later, but all of this is out there for your reference. Airport Improvement Plan. Once you have your master plan, then we start to look at your funding. And you put your AIP together. There was $9 billion distributed in 2025. There's a couple different federal legislations out there for this. 3,000 over almost 4,000 grants awarded. 1,700 unique airports. 90 to 95% of the dollars come from the federal government. So there's a small commitment, a share on the local side, which 90 cents to 95 cents on every dollar, that's huge when you start talking about what's possible. Now, what gets a lot of companies into some difficulties is we certainly know that communities have to worry about potholes, sewer infrastructure, and all that. And many people will say, well, we should fix the potholes first, to give an example, before we do the airport. The problem is those dollars that are available from the federal government are not available for the potholes. So if you try to make these compete, you just get left behind. So we encourage communities, get out there, put your plans together, and realize this is an entirely different set of dollars and resources. There's really a mosaic to this. You're going to layer these sources. You're going to start with your FAA, your AIP funds, the bipartisan legislative funds, and then you're going to look at some state aviation matching. Maybe there's some block grants. Talk to your state legislature, your local leaders. And then are there local sources, fuel sales, hangar leases, private entities that can come in? I see a number of airports where they're attracting headquarters. So like in Brookings, one of the airports that we fly into, there's a very large agriculture, a dairy construction company. They build these large dairy infrastructures all over the Midwest. Well, they have their company headquarters right on the airport. They built that, and then it has access to their hangars and all of that. It works fantastic. And of course, fuel sales. Planes need these fuels to fly, and pilots are happy to fill up their planes at local gas stops, and communities can do very well as they increase that air traffic to their area. And of course, private funding, hangar developments under land lease agreements. There is a tremendous need for hangars and resources on airports. So planning first, funding second, promote your airport to demonstrate the need, then start to go after the grants and really try to put this all together. A couple quick success stories. Just to highlight ones, and when we start to look at after you've put your plan together and then you've done your funding, now it's really about marketing and promotion. Milwaukee Mitchell, they've made MKE easy to fly. They won the ACI-NA's top marketing award. So airports are marketing. And if I just go back for a minute, what happens in a lot of communities is they get to the funding, they do the master plan, they do the improvement plan, and then they forget they need to tell people in their community that they're doing this. And so if I come back up here, these are success stories of communities that have taken that next step, which is, okay, we put a plan in place. Now we're excited about it and we want to build this out and let everybody know. Asheville Regional, where adventure takes flight, one of the most awarded airports as well. Ontario, SoCal is so easy. So really building out their airport, promoting it, and then letting the airport do its job, which is attract traffic, and aircraft and pilots and future business. We have the Airport Steam Festival in Tennessee, which that annual festival draws over 2,000 visitors with record traffic counts of aircraft flying in. One of the very important things to remember is in the general aviation world, when people have airplanes, they love to fly and they need to fly for a mission. Whether that's, hey, let's go to the Steam Festival, or let's go to the UP, or let's go to Door County, Wisconsin, because they want to experience the cherries. All of those things, people in general aviation like to stretch their wings, like to stretch out and experience the local tourism and the local amenities. So advertise those. Advertise your airport as a corridor to bring people in. Boca Raton, past, present, and future, with a $693 million economic impact. They received the George Long Award in 2023, and promoting one of their murals. And then East Hampton. So amazing. They sent out 32,000 postcards. They saved it from closure. 77 million economic impact documented and preserved, and that airport is still open. And I can tell you this: once you lose an airport, it is so difficult to get the airport back up and running, and it's so expensive. Every community, every airport size can launch a winning campaign. So with that, I'm going to just take a quick sip of water. Nathan, is there any questions?
Yeah, we could address a couple here that are related. This question is: my small local airport is in a ring city near a major city with a major airport. Is my play to act as a local hub for personal transport to and from the larger metro airport? And then related to that, another attendee asks, if that is the play, or at least a play, how do you plan for this so you can become a connector?
I have to dig a little bit deeper into it. And as I understand the question is, whenever you're inside those rings, or maybe you're a smaller airport inside of a ring of larger ones, we see this. In fact, I'll be down at Phoenix area doing some of that. I see it in some of these larger Class B airspaces like Minneapolis. But those small airports, the attraction factor they have is, hey, it's a little easier to get in and out. You're not dealing with the major airspace, and a lot of times go after the leases and the hangars, because I find that people are looking for hangars all over the place. And if you have a local airport, so let's say you have an airport that's maybe 40, 50 miles away, and you find out all their hangars are full, you should start looking at how do you build some hangars and get some people in, because if those airports are full, there are planes and pilots looking for new hangars, and they're transient. They'll move. I'm not sure I answered exactly what the question was, but I think I got the spirit of it. Any more, or would you like me to move on?
Why don't you move on? We can address more at the end as well.
Very good. Okay, so let's talk about aviation as an essential infrastructure. I think one of the things, and if you're catching my messaging, the awareness gap, we need to talk about aviation as an essential infrastructure, an anchor like a university or a museum or anything like that, not as a luxury. The airport is a permanent fixture. It's a permanent resource. It's not going away if it's built. And so we need to talk about it as an anchor to that community. It brings in medical and emergency access. We know that communities that lose their airports actually lose some of the life-saving technologies that can be available to them, and actually their healthcare access goes down. Business connectivity and market access. Manufacturing firms, I see more and more where business owners are flying into airports that have at least 3,000 foot runways, maybe a little one. But if they've got good airport operations with a hard surface, I personally have flown with a couple of them. They're going to fly into these small communities. They're going to set up shop. I know an electrical contractor. They go in and base out of these smaller communities because usually the regulations work a little better for them. They have more access, and they're not competing. So the connectivity can be fantastic. And if they can get into your airport with, say, a Pilatus or a TBM, which is going to bring 6 to 8 people in, they don't have to go through TSA. They don't have to go through the major hubs and all that. They can get right in and out. And many of them are home to be back with their families that night. So a lot of times you'll see in the corporate space, they'll fly out of their home airports. They'll leave at 7 in the morning, and they're landing back at their own airport or their home space by 6, 7 o'clock at night, and still back there to be with their family. And that's a very big attraction for them. And of course, don't deny or turn away the tourism and amenity development. I see this all the time. I mean, you look at the Cirrus literature, or you look at the Diamond. One of the things that they promote heavily is the tourism, using these aircraft for travel, to go to spots, and the Grand Canyon. And I mean, I can just list airport after airport where people are coming in, taking advantage of the Airbnbs or just whatever local amenities are there. So talk about that, and then build a relationship with your local airport. So when somebody lands there, they know, hey, this is where you're going to go to participate in some of our local attractions. I like to talk about the distance penalty. When we don't promote our airports, there is, if you look at the peer review literature, there is a very profound distance penalty. And what that is if you're a high amenity area with air access, you can expect a 3 to 4% growth of capita and your economic development. We know this isn't a necessarily correlation, or it's probably more of a correlation versus a causation, but we know it's there. A high amenity without aircraft, when we look across the board, and we did a longitudinal study of 20 airports, it was pretty consistent that growth rate would only be at about 1.1%. If you're a rural area with air access, you might expect a 2.9% growth over that same longitudinal study. If you're a rural area without air access, that you now drop below 1%. So we know there is a penalty to not keeping your airport up and promoting it. People will pass over you, pilots will go by you, businesses will no longer look your way, and that is what we call the distance penalty. And when I talk to many communities, one of the things that I remind them is, I can't predict your growth, but I can predict the penalty if you don't start to work towards catching these future trends. So now, once you've done your airport planning, you've applied for the funds, you're starting to promote, here's an idea of what a 12-month marketing blueprint, just to give you an idea. We put this in the white paper. My hope is that people download this and they start to use this to learn and to engage. But your first couple months, build your foundation, define your objectives, certainly get that SEO audit, and do a stakeholder survey. Do a survey of your stakeholders to find out, how do they perceive the airport? We like to do it in 3 rings. What do you know about your airport? What are other people talking about your airport? And then how should you be talking about your airport? Define your digital value proposition. How do you stand out? Start to optimize those keywords. Months 5 and 6. After we have all of that, we would recommend, and what we do with our clients, we start launching the content. Get that regular drip of monthly articles about, here's the amenities, here's the business, here's the success stories. But show people that you're active and engaged, and then they'll come back to you for content. Content is hard. It has to happen. And I remind people, unfortunately, we're still competing with cat videos. So you have to put out the best you can and stay ahead of this. Authority. Start to build your storytelling, start to build your workforce examples, and then use digital PR and backlinks. Start to get people to link back to you and talk about your stories. 9 to 10 months into this, you're going to be doing a review, reputation management. Start to engage with your local ambassadors. Is everybody telling the same story? 11 to 12 months, look at the next year, do a review, reset for the next year too, and then really hone in your messaging. In a lot of ways, marketing is very simple, do more of what works and do less of what doesn't. It's an operating rhythm. It's not a precise science, but you just have to put it together. You need to be consistent, and you need to start moving forward. Community engagement. This is really the core of the marketing operating system. Get some alignment, get the same message, get people talking about the same resources, momentum, build that urgency. It really starts to work when you're working on a messaging and then you're out and about. Maybe you're at a function and you start to hear those messages being told back to you. It's really that 360-degree loop of marketing. Embrace uncertainty. I know people, uncertainty is hard, right? But don't wait for the certainty because it's not coming. Timing is going to be imperfect, but you need to just start getting the messaging out. Sustain momentum. There should always be successful things to talk about, no matter how big or small. It could be just a couple of students at the flight school who got their first solo or their first private pilot's license, or it could be the company that broke ground or the hangars that you did. Whatever it is, find things to talk about and don't just rely on one champion. Find many, many champions and talk about them. Raise urgency. Somebody is telling your airport story. Hopefully it's you. Connect the airport, connect the pilots, talk to the aviation mechanics, talk to the people who are connected to your airport, and help raise that urgency. Leverage networks. Amplify your existing networks. Don't be afraid to share all these personal stories with the people you already connect with. You'll be surprised at how many people will be like, oh, I know somebody who also does this, or I have somebody in my network that does the same thing. And then you start to leverage all of that. Be bold and persistent. Failure really occurs, I believe, when we start to disengage. And joy as an asset. Talk about this in a joyful way, because the celebration and the lasting associations really are there. Open houses, and let people come and experience it and build that momentum. Add some urgency and some consistency, and over time, like a garden, it'll bloom and it'll come together. Your runway ahead is filled with potential. I hope you're gathering that I'm pretty excited about this, and there's a reason for that. I do believe there's a tremendous amount of growth here. I do believe this is an untapped vein and economic resource for communities. And so review and create your plan. Apply for the funding. Don't leave money on the table. Build a community engagement strategy, and get that in your annual rhythm. Just make it part of what you're doing. Start your strategy, and then plan for the disruption. Plan for the advanced air mobility, the vertiports, the e-vertical takeoff and landing, the drones. Plan for that new aircraft, and know that action always leads to visible, measurable results. That's how we build momentum. And this paper that we're going to release is your starting point. I hope it's helpful. So I'm going to leave this slide up here for a minute if you would like to get the QR link. But ImpactAir from Golden Shovel, as we're planning for the future to transform airports from transit points to economic growth engines. That's really our goal. We want to help you expand your airports. We want to help you find the resources. I'm going to come back to this slide, so don't worry about it. I'm going to jump one ahead. Let me tell you a little bit about what's coming. We're also going to be releasing, we have 2 white paper research papers right now working through the draft and the polishing. One of those is the economic imports of rural airports, where we're going to address rural airport economic impacts and community perception. So really digging into that awareness gap and changing that perception. Your airport is an incredible asset. And then the next paper coming shortly after that will be Aviation Investment Positively Shapes Economic Outcomes. We're going to talk about how the smallest rural communities win big with airport infrastructure investment. So we're really trying to put the tools and the information out to help communities build out this. Let me back up one more slide. I'm just going to hold this up here for about 30 seconds. If anybody wants to take a picture of it or grab that QR code, because you can download this white paper, which is pretty substantial. I don't remember how big it was. I don't have it in front of me, but I think it was certainly north of 50 or 60 pages, full of a lot of resources and ideas. Okay. So I'll jump into some questions here if we have any up there. I think I've provided a lot. You can have access to download this, and Nathan, I believe there's a form they can fill out just to share their email, and we can get back to them. But if you have more information, you're welcome to contact us. Laura Christie is our director of business development who fields these. Um, and then if an engagement happens, I'm happy to jump in on that and find out how we're going to leverage our skills and talents to help communities. But Nathan, any questions that we have out there?
Yes, absolutely. I'm just going to start from the top here. With the U.S. Postal Service in such dire fiscal straits, is there an opportunity for rural airports for basic mail delivery service and packages a la FedEx?
I think the answer to that is absolutely. I don't have anything specific on it, but certainly the opportunity would be there with the autonomous vertical takeoff and landing, where that cargo could be moved around quite efficiently. We can get away from some of the roads, and I think the precision delivery could really lend itself there. I think that's a great idea. Frankly, I hadn't really explored that much, but thanks for the question, and I guess the easy answer is yes. It's just, where is the legislative willingness to go there, or how do they have to change that to make that happen?
Great. Regarding natural disasters, is there a role my airport can play in recovery and remediation efforts in case of tornadoes, hurricanes, and things like that?
Yeah. So when we have a disaster, and obviously your airport can become the gateway to getting supplies in, and very quickly can get things in and out. If an airport goes through part of the disaster area, then there's usually quick recovery funds to do that. But to your point, if you have a disaster, your airport will be one of the quick transportation corridors for healthcare, medical. We now, it's not just Lifeline helicopters. They're using, like I showed earlier, these air ambulances where teams are coming in and out of rural areas with a flying ICU. I have a friend who flies, and they do organ harvest, and a lot of times he'll get the call. They jump in the plane, they fly to a location, a surgical team will extract an organ, and then they can get it right into the local community where that donor can be part of that process. So all of those disasters and all of that are part of this air transportation network.
Great. Um, my airport is within a community that also has rail, a port, and highways. How can I leverage my airport within such a multimodal hub?
Can you say that question one more time?
My airport is within a community that also has rail, a port, and highways. How can I leverage my airport within such a multimodal hub?
That's a great question, and lucky community with all those multi modes. My initial thoughts would be, figure out where there's the intersection points, figure out how the logistics of what can happen there, and then I think there's an opportunity to promote, right? Because with rail, and whether it's going to be over the road cargo and trucking, getting it in and out through the air side can shorten that length of, or I'll do it this way, right? You're closer to the coast when you can have that airport that can then go into those multi modes. So you really can shrink the world that your community is participating in because you have better access. Bemidji, Minnesota, they're flying every day cargo planes that are going in and out. And they're bringing things in from local hubs of Amazon and other ones, and then those are hitting their local commercial delivery services. So I think it's kind of a broad answer to the question. I'd have to exactly see what the community has, but I think it's leveraging a lot of conversations, and then looking for businesses, transportation logistic companies that could come in and help with that. There's a lot of very good transportation logistic companies that would look for an opportunity like that where they can help build out a solution.
Okay. Next question. We are working to activate an industrial park that fronts on the north side of our runways. Are there specific industries or businesses that may be seeking space of this nature? For example, MRO, logistics, drones, R&D.
Yeah, all the above. What I would recommend there is start to do a search and find some of the connections on LinkedIn who might be connected to them, and do some invitations. But yes, the aviation industry space has a lot, but it's not huge. I mean, the connections are small. We're running into people all the time. I would be investigating, go to like the signature Atlantic FBOs and see what those companies are building out, and then find out who they're attracting as well. It's really about proximity. So everything that the question said in that community, yes, leverage out that you have these opportunities, and then target. The one thing I would do for the person that originated this question is really make a narrow scope of who and what you would like to see expanded out, because you don't want to chase everybody. You want to chase the right people. Sometimes it can be hard to chase a smaller group, but you can have more success.
Thank you. Next question. People think our airport is dead, that nothing is going on there. Should we use video, virtual reality? What's the most effective?
Yeah, I see this a lot. Get some activity in, maybe invite some pilots in. I would go out to the airport. I'm sure you've been out there, but have the local pilots. I'm sure there's local pilots. Have them start to talk, and then start to look for flight instructors. Start to look for flight schools. Start to see what other tangents are out there. But bring in that activity. Host a fly-in. As crazy as it is, we talk about in aviation. Hey, where'd you get your last $100 hamburger? And what that means is we'll look for Saturday afternoon barbecues that airports will host, and pilots will fly in. They'll throw their $20 to $50 down. They'll buy their hamburgers off the grill. They'll talk, and then you get that activity, and you start to build that buzz. And you really want your airport to start to look like a beehive versus a desert.
Next question. We have utilized millions of FAA dollars to expand our runways, and we're able to attract regional jet service to our community after having no service for over 5 years. I guess this isn't actually a question. And only prop plane service prior.
Yeah.
So maybe that does touch on some of the opportunities you're talking about if
Yeah.
you're able to make those upgrades.
Yeah, and congratulations to them. And of course, not many, but there's a number of aircraft that are airports that use the essential air services money. And that's one of the things that I remind people is keep advocating for those dollars at the federal level. State legislators, let your local folks know that those can't go away, because those essential air services dollars really do help keep a lot of traffic moving to rural areas.
And this next question, you touched on, I think, probably a little bit with that mail and package delivery, but is there any opportunity for pharmacy delivery?
Oh, I'm sure there certainly is. I would say that, let's not limit ourselves. It really is going back to the promotion. If you think that your airport, I'm going to back this up, by the way. If you think that your airport has these services, start promoting them. Start talking about them. Hey, we'd like to attract a pharmaceutical delivery company, or talk about that as potentials and opportunities, and see what kind of leads you can generate from that.
Next question we have here is, what do UAS or UAV companies need to establish operations at a small municipal airport? How can our community participate in this industry? We have a county population of 10,500.
Yeah. So you're set up pretty well in a lot of ways. Go look at the federal regulations, but when you start to do the unmanned and the vertical and the drones and all that, you're going to need some electrical ports. You're going to need to make sure that electrical infrastructure is there. And the bigger thing is making sure the airspace is correctly designated and you get all of that applied for. But work through all of that through the FAA, and then just make sure your airport is compliant with it, and then start promoting it. And don't necessarily wait to promote it until you have everything. Start right now. Start talking about how your airport and your community is looking to attract these types of industries, and that you're working through it, and that you're working through the process. And they'll start contacting you, hopefully, and be like, hey, I see you've got this opportunity, you're working through it. But start telling people ahead of the game that this is where you're going. Point to a spot on the horizon, and start to get all the ships steaming that way.
Last question I have here, if a community is prioritizing, if they're making those plans for the future and looking at opportunities, is there one upgrade that you would recommend, or is it all kind of dependent on their situation?
Boy, that's a great question. First, to prioritize, obviously, make sure your runways and your landing systems and any instrument approaches, get yourself there. We've got to have the runway to a point where we can safely bring aircraft in and out. Then I certainly would start looking at your FBO, your fixed base operation, or wherever people what building pilots are going to use, and then to hangars. And if you're not familiar with this, most aircraft or most airports have a courtesy car. One of the crazy little pro tip here, but I fly into a lot of airports where I fly in and you're like, hey, where's the courtesy car? Is there one available? And what that is the city will purchase or they'll use a cop that or a police car that's out of service or something, and they'll put it at the airport for pilots to use. That's a mode of transportation that a pilot can come in, they can pay for the gas in the car, and then they can go in and out of the city. Many airports forget those cars or they let them go to disrepair and all this, and so that travels pretty quickly. That's not an accessible thing. So for a very small investment of having a courtesy car available for your pilots that come in and out, or your business travelers and so forth, that's a huge thing. And they'll gladly put the money in, they'll pay for the gas, and they'll travel around to the amenities, and then they'll buy fuel. So make sure your runways are in tip-top shape. Make sure your assets, your fixed base operation, what rooms, what kind of lobby and buildings are available for the pilots and their passengers. Then look at hangars, and then keep building out from there. Maybe you can attract a restaurant, or maybe you can attract a flight school.
Great. Well, that's all the questions we have. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, everybody, for being here. As Ron said, if you go to that landing page for the white paper, you can fill out a form. You'll get an automated email within about a minute with a link to download the full white paper. It's full of all the information that Ron talked about here, and a lot more that you can use to kind of plan for the future of your airport. We'll also put you on the list. We can reach out to you when those other white papers that he mentioned are available. In the meantime, feel free to reach out to us anytime if you'd like to talk more about airports and what you can do to plan for your future.
Well, thank you, Nathan. Thank you for all the participants. I think this is one of the most engaged amount of questions I've had in a while. So very happy to share the information.
Thank you.